in this stage, you're like many accomplished musicians. The music recycles and comes back out of you. How do you feel about composing tunes in this style?
Well, I've always done it, and I the first time I ever tried to make my own tune, was I hadn't been playing that long, and I was hearing people play in the key of C, and I liked the sound of it, and so I made up a tune that I could play. You know, that was the first thing like that, and then I started kind of doing that accidentally. I mean, there's an old hymn that I'd heard when I was a kid, and then I had listened to different recordings on 78s of this old song called The Land Where We'll Never Grow Old. And I tried to play it as a waltz at a dance, and I got three notes into it and played an entirely different tune. Played the tune for 12, 13 minutes there, and I remembered it the next day, and I've been playing it ever since. So I sort of composed it accidentally, without necessarily trying to. Like, somebody told me once that I had a bad memory and a good imagination. And, and I think a lot of the things that we play, I think they were kind of composed collectively by people that played the tunes, down through the decades. I mean, nobody really plays like the people played 75 years ago now. And if they do, they're just being parrots, you know. I feel that's my opinion, and we have a bunch of things going into us, and when we learn a piece of tune comes into our, and we actually try to swallow it and chew it up, comes out a little different than it went in. No matter what anybody says, it never comes out exactly the same, because it just can't. The music can't really be confined in that kind of way. And people that try and do that, they're like just people that collect butterflies and kill them and stick them with a pin and put them on a board. That's dead, to me. And people are obsessive, about using technology to actually slow stuff down so they can technically figure out every jot and tittle of these old tunes. And that's not really the way those guys learn. There are some of those guys that say, who was this guy? Wilson Douglas came out here from West Virginia years ago, and he had been around the famous member of the Carpenter family, French Carpenter, quite a bit when he was young, and he swore on a stack of Bibles that French Carpenter made him learn his tunes exactly the way he played them. They don't sound anything like the way French Carpenter played,
Yeah,
And
you can do your best, but it's not going to work.
it's it's not really copycat stuff, but it's a certain, and so I feel like we all are composing these tunes collectively down a long stream of time. you know Nobody plays the tunes now the way they were played 150 years ago. Nobody. Even if they're playing the same notes, it doesn't have the same feeling. We grew up listening to rock and roll, and uh, and that has influence on the way we hear things. It has to. Everything we've heard has influence on.
Right. I play a lot of weird banjo tunings that well, I make some up, but I mean even the traditional quote traditional ones that I use, uh, I realize that some of them are so far out. If I use them for composing, uh,
Uh-huh.
because what you said, I have other influences that they didn't have when they were playing. you know
Yeah.
if they had known that that tuning reminds you know, is reminiscent of a jazz piece or something, they wouldn't have heard that jazz. It had that jazz piece hadn't been composed yet. But some of these, so they use these weird tunings within the framework that they had in their lives.
Right.
Um,
And it, you know, it just can, oh, it's always changing. You know, 120 years ago, fiddlers were beginning to hear ragtime piano music, which is where it all came from. And some of them, those fiddlers, loved it right away and took it on. You know, this is cool music. You know, and other old timers hated it, didn't want anything to do with it. You know, but it made its way into the center of the old time fiddle tradition. You know, and there's a lot of stuff that aren't necessarily true rags as they're defined by an ethnomusicologist, but they're raggy in a certain kind of way, and they have a certain particular kind of syncopation, which came from those piano players, you know, really originally. And early country guitar players were trying to play like piano players were too. The piano had a huge influence on a lot of that stuff. People were making 78 records as early as 1915 and 16, you know, those old one-sided records. But the first commercial old-time record on a flat record, you know, was Eck Robertson in 1922, Sally Gooden. That was the first.
do you
The
think that
first.
do you think that rags on the piano came from listening to the guitar and mandolin and fiddle rag players, or
No,
the other way around?
no, the other way around. All that rag influence came from piano first.
Hmm.
Came from piano first, and there were professional composers composing all of these rags. There's people that collect these cylinder records that were made began in the 1890s, and there were lots of rags recorded onto those cylinders, and uh, and there are people that are gonzo cylinder uh, collectors, you know, that are still finding these old cylinders and playing and learning this stuff, you know, that these piano players were playing way back. And they were not just, most of those piano players were not just ear players. They actually were literate, musically literate, you know. And, but they put something into the whole mix, you know, and there's always new little threads coming into the mix. Whether you like them or not is another story, you know. And some people that really like the oldest kind of thread, they don't want too much to do with that. But you know, I'm crazy about a lot of it, you know.
Mhm.
And a lot of the musicians that I respect a lot like that stuff too, you know.
Yeah, it's really different than just like a straight hoedown, like straight hoedowns and waltzes and stuff like that.
Yeah. But
Um,
there were people playing dance music at home all over the country, not just in the South, you know, everywhere,
mhm.
everywhere. Here, as soon as there were white people that came here, there were fiddles here, people that played, you know, here in California, you know, and and uh, and it took on a little different character everywhere the music went, you know. Mhm.
Well, I think we should wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask you, uh, during the pandemic, did you, well, I know you've been caring for family right now a
Mhm.
lot, and maybe not playing as much as you otherwise would, but what do you think right now in this stage of your life? I mean, is your activity your focus? Is it same as it's been for last 20 years? Is there something particular that you want to do or that you are doing musically that you can talk
Uh,
about?
well, you know, I'm still trying to master the things that I began to learn, you know, 40, 50 years ago, you know. I mean, I play a little bit of fiddle every day, and I'm getting most almost every day I play a little harmonica, and mostly I'm playing fiddle tunes on the harmonicas. I played blues for a while, and I just found it uh, limiting for me, you know. And I'll compose things on the harmonica because it has certain kinds of things which it can do really well, and it's a great composing tool. The banjo too. You know, I've been playing some banjo. I'm not a great banjo player, but I've been playing at it, you know, for 25 years, and I get at a little different piece of the music with all these things, and I'm just kind of still trying to find. I feel like in me this music has gone through this distillation process, and I'm still kind of trying to get the dross out and to try and get the pure drop as I can find, you know, as according to my lights, you know. That's really, I'm not ambitious for anything but to just keep trying to play until I can't play anymore, you know, and to share it, you know. I'm not trying to set the world on fire, change anybody's mind, or I'm not a missionary for old time music at all, you know. But I like playing dance music, and I'll keep doing that as long as I can. It's a lot more work for me than it used to be. And you know, and I've made a few fiddles, and I've made the one that I'm playing now, you know, and I'll probably make a few more if I can, you know. I like that. The social thing, when I find players that I'm really compatible with, you know, is a great thing, you know. And even people that I'm not that compatible with, you know, there's a really nice social contact. This music is really all originally social music and not performance music, you know. And I feel strongly about that. I think a lot of people that are trying to turn it into make it primarily into this performance music are barking up the wrong tree, you know. I feel it's my personal opinion, and there are plenty of people that I love dearly that would take offense at that, but I'm sorry. That's how I feel.